we're looking at using and transposing formulas in this video. Well, technically the plural should be formulae, but we're going to go with formulas because it's easier to say. We're doing this because we want to be able to manipulate those formulas to be equal to the variable that we're investigating in a particular question. Our success criteria here is we want to be able to apply the rules of algebra to rearrange that formula and to substitute given values into a formula in order to evaluate for whatever variable it is we're looking for. Now, what a formula is effectively an equation that has multiple variables or multiple unknown values, and it's going to give us the relationship between those variables. When we rearrange, which is often called transposing this formula, so that it's equal to a particular variable, like a specific one that we're looking at, we're making that variable what's called the subject of the formula. So if a question says make y the subject of this formula, that means rearrange it so that your equation or your formula reads y equals this. So let's have a look at our first example here. So it's saying evaluate p. So remember, evaluate means tell me what the answer is, solve it. If 2 times p plus q minus r equals z, and we have values for q, r, and z. So we have values for everything in this formula apart from p. Now there's two methods that we can work with here. The first one is transpose it first. Okay, so we're going to we ignore the values that are there, and we just rearrange this equation to be equal to p. So at the moment it's equal to z. I would be, actually instead of extending that bracket first, I'm going to move the r across first. So we've got 2 times p plus q equals z plus r. Divide everything by 2, so p plus q equals z plus r over 2, and then p is going to be z plus r over 2 minus q. Now that we've rearranged, we've transposed so that we've got an equation where p is the subject, we would substitute in our values up here. So we'd say p is going to be equal to 11 plus -3 over 2 minus 2. That's going to be 11 minus 3 is going to be 8 over 2 is 4, minus 2 is going to be 2. So we know here, in this case, p equals 2. Our other method is to substitute first and then to rearrange with whatever sort of simplified equation we've ended up with. So in here, we're going to have 2 times p. We still don't know the value of p. We're pretending we don't know it's 2. Plus q, which is 2, minus -3. And that equals 11. So now we can rearrange and solve to try and work out what p is equal to. So we've got 2 times p plus 2 minus -3. So that's effectively plus 3. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides to get rid of that. So let's write this a little bit further over. P plus 2 equals 11 minus 3, which is going to be 8. Now we've got to expand. Oh, no, we can do the exact same thing we did over here. Instead of expanding the bracket, we can just divide by 2. So p plus 2 is going to be 4. Take away 2, p equals 2. So we get to the same answer either way. It really depends on your preference of how you want to rearrange that. For example 2, we've got nothing to substitute in. We're just being asked to make c the subject of both of these formulas. This is a little bit harder than your standard rearranging, so let's give it a go. So for part A here, we've got a square root, so we've got to deal with that first. We're going to make it e squared equals 3c minus 7a. I'm going to add the 7a. I didn't leave myself much room here, so my equals probably aren't going to line up very well. It's going to equal 3c, and then we're just going to divide by 3. And that gives us c. So that one's not too hard. It's just that square root can look a little bit scary. Don't let it freak you out. You just gotta remember your steps. Part B, again, fractions. I know people panic a little bit when we see fractions, but all we're doing is cross-multiplying, getting ourselves a common denominator. So when we cross-multiply here, we don't need to multiply the right-hand side of our equation because we're not changing the fraction, we're just writing something as an equivalent fraction. Like if we have 1/2, we can multiply that whole thing by 2, and we're effectively just ending up with 2/4. Yeah, so 2/4 is still the same fraction as 1/2, so we're not changing anything. So we're going to multiply both sides by b. So we would have b over ab, and both sides, or both fractions, by a. So a over ab, and that's still equal to 1 over c minus 2. Now this fraction, because we've got a common denominator, we can smush it together into one fraction. So it becomes b minus a over ab equals 1 over c minus 2. Now, 1 over something makes it very hard to deal with, but if we turn both our fractions upside down, so both sides of our equation, then that will make it a lot easier to work with because it'll be c minus 2 over 1, which is just c minus 2. So this is like saying if we had 1/2 equals 2/4, which it does, and we flip them both upside down, you end up with 2/1 equals 4/2. Now, that's still equal, even though it's now different values. Yeah, 1/2 and 2/1 are not the same thing, but the two sides of our equation are equal. So we call that taking the reciprocal. So we would write this as AB over B minus A is equal to C minus 2. We don't need to write the over 1 because that's kind of implied. And we want just C by itself. So we end up with AB over B minus A plus 2 equals C. So going back to our success criteria here, we can apply the rules of algebra to rearrange our formula, and we can substitute given values into a formula if the question asks us to evaluate. Now, in this section, there are often quite wordy questions where you've got to construct the formula before you're able to solve anything. In that case, just refer back to the section on constructing linear equations, or because you can apply those rules to constructing any other kind of equation, linear or not. And that, I think, will really help you if you start getting stuck in the words. So don't worry too much about whether a question is wordy, just make sure you can perform these skills first.